Hello, America, world, everywhere the human species body stands. Boxing, martial arts, and wrestling share an identity that was used functionally by ancients before the sciences became criminally foreign influence. They valued differences, including differences of opinions, because it was used to discern the identity of the hyper-simultaneous. For example, honest science reveals this. And where and how the sciences share an identity. And where they appear not to, it shows also the importance of understanding its volume science, which includes how it is three distinct value progressions that are connected, as it looks like from inside of itself, the discernment of the identity of space/existence. It is to know formally they have agreed, missing all that's tied to it and uses of it, but agreed to call space formally that apart from physical identities or values. And so this communicates other than how nature communicates. It's showing us the identity of relativity/hyperrelativity, and where and how more and more of a forever nature, an identity of forever nature is being made. Also hyper simultaneously relative to how it communicates with and uses the phenomenon of a special difference. Also, the sciences are recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed certain type of victim/hyper victim. Every campus. Now the campus system go with the republic that was criminally re-engineered in some ancient times. There are proofs that before this is what led to the aspects of perfection that were then re-revealed, rediscovered, tactically, criminally re-engineered to effectively to measure and maintain, not discerned, a hyperarchetypal breaching method, a hyperarchetypal criminal enterprise, if you will. I am not a lawyer. I'm not a police form. I've never taken an oath, by the way. There are people trying to present me as a doctor and a police who have been planting evidences with the FBI, state police, and Weathersfield police coordinated. And it's nothing personal. They also lie about that. That's how they got away. So there's a complete possession of the short words of the leaders of everywhere the human species body has a body standing. We have been, our names of the human species body is a certain kind of identity theft, fraud, slander method against every single person, all locations, areas, and states. And so to keep effectively, no matter how powerful a leader could get, any individual voice has to state collusions, forcing qualities of fact-cheating nature that can't be defended in the name of any location, area, state, or overall country, territory, whatever. At the same time, syntactically, there is a complete possession/hyper-possession that the identity of the hyper-simultaneous has relative to where it is. For example, it shows this how it is relativity, the value of humanity, an invisible but still discernible body of volume, distinct from other species bodies' volumes, but also non-distinct. 2 eyes, for example, black pupils, whites of eyes, exceptions. See, we have the same eyes. We have exceptions. And except for how simultaneously exceptions in exception nature are simultaneously teaching us about what is hyper additional that we can't be or make up. In this, where every finite detail of the biggest thing or the smallest thing has three identities of possession, coming to, from, as, with, and for itself. Well, as itself, well, not, where, and how. We can't be the other species body, but we are anyway, by the same identity. That is distinctly, not distinctly, and hyper simultaneously, and demonstration of itself. Really, it's proper to say, more proper is showing us to say, it's identity of relation to itself, and I lost the track. In other words, boxing, martial arts, and wrestling, for example, they share an identity, and this is functional. There are functions that can be applied by this. It is functional how the sciences, not only do they share an identity, they share one individually grouped and together. See, but the sciences have the significance of sequence shifts, self-value with summary convictions, and with that are juxtaposed with theory. And this relative to where and how. I'm not a lawyer. But the law, the nature of the law, and the identity of the law, the physics of the law, the nature of the law, and the identity of the law are three distinct volume sciences. And again, identity of these three volume sciences: individual difference, group differences, as itself. Why? And then the species body of individual bodies, no. And so this is hypernative. And it's words, it's short words. And defenses of them calmly, and or defenses of them aggressively, syntactically. Where and how peace comes with hyper peace, therefore. For example, these are one of the things they are: group differences, species body difference, and individual difference, simultaneously as that which employed. Black pupils, whites of eyes, and additionally by our founders, who did not have free speech. They communicated for us to communicate about that and to understand that certain type of victim / hyper victim had and has employed, where and how being and having been employed are functions. By the function, singular, of the breaching method that was taking place, with way worse than crimes, as crimes, way worse than just predicate acts, whole methods of predicate acts delivery, way worse than just criminal insidiousness, because relative to this, the importance, for example, of how we have not been allowed to prove, oh, that's God, that's where, in other words, there are proofs that honest reception of the sciences also shows that the ancients would use a God variable. God is distinct from the identity of the hyper-simultaneous, that which communicates for itself, and as itself, as everything else cannot be itself, but is anyway. Just as all the finite and group parts of our bodies have a semi-nature relationship to our complete identity. our complete identity, therefore has relativity to its identity, slash hyperrelativity. Identity has relativity to positive and negative simultaneously. Weighs hyper additionally, greater than and more finite than, and ways active, grouped, in ways that people with theory, formally, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, insidiousness to the associated with the fact, true nature, quality, aspects, and natures of people A through Z. For example, regarding the value of the right to vote, where and how simultaneously we have abridgments and uses of everything we have to say with short words. For example, individually grouped and together, forced, checked, hurt, persuaded, to ignore that other one and to self-value that, because that's also used for words, because how that everyone's used remotely as fact-checking nature. We're supposed to understand how the breaching method had complete syntactical possession, slavery of every single person individually grouped and together, and the difference and of that employed the species human body everywhere it was and is to make syntactical defenses and roles with defenses of economic treatments, for example, where and how value/value progressions with identity simultaneously again as those sciences, but additionally from it, well, as it, and where and how additionally that identity that no one could imitate, but it's still there to discern. In other words, the giraffe has black pupils, whites of eyes, has male female species body, has the value of whatever nature, the extent of their communications that they are capable of, only increasing, even if that phenomenon is taken away. Even if you put all the drafts, we never see each other. In other words, this breaching method employed everyone to hurt each other and or to help each other and or to stay roles with uses of exceptions that are simultaneous and or uses of special uses of all words and therefore all phrases. So we'll examine the hyperintelligence module alone even. In other words, before we have to, this is at locations, all communication locations, including the location of every body. There's also the things hyper additional to treatment, subject treatments like artificial intelligence, effectively used by a breaching method to measure and maintain its uses of intelligence, of overt criminal enterprises, private ones, hundreds of countries, and then further grouped self-valued roles with functions and uses of their syntax nature and their differences from each other, where and how being and having been employed are projections to, from, as, well, as, with, and for our syntactical treatments, therefore our functions that can't be defended in the human species body anywhere the body stands. In other words, it employed the sense and sensibilities, to use Jane Austen's phrase, of every human body, blaming other things, others, and ourselves. The reason I use her phrase is because they distinctly did not have free speech during Jane Austen's lifetime, which I have to look up what year she lived. I believe it was around the Romantic time period, with the capital R, they say. To discern that from Romantic the word in the dictionary. Know how dictionaries have more than one definition. There's also, everything is in demonstration of the importance of understanding and of being led by the value of, of the identity of the extent of the identity of the hyper simultaneous that we can discern. Because it also comes with its identity of relationship to itself, where and how it is using a special difference and the difference between them to show us how and why it wants and needs us to. It communicates about how it has how 5 distinct identities of hyper invisible but still discernible. Sequence nature as simultaneous nature. Actually, sequence nature slash simultaneous nature. And that's where more, and while simultaneously, the rest of our body is like the rest of the body to a cell, of a living body, even a plant. A semi-nature relationship to its complete identity. And its complete identity's relativity to itself. And the only increasing value of that, which is critical, slash hypercritical, because we're inside. In other words, it's like a part of your body, the smallest part of your body, trying to know and stay positive to itself, distinctly from but not distinctly from your complete self, and not just simultaneously, but further hyper simultaneously. So the species, humanity, for example, there are needs to use humanity as a value with our syntax. This breaching method used with boxing, martial arts, and wrestling are shown at, how it's easier to discern with the sciences share an identity different ways, and it is hard in different ways. Tactical ulterior from the voices of the sciences. For example, self-value by experts on each of the sciences and the religions are uses also singularly used for a number of reasons, but also that singularly used by the breaching method, which again employed negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures as nature's demonstration to humanity that rolls with the crazy laws that colonization put against their own people, not because they were already entrenched from some ancient times. Forced collusions, forced defenses of individual bodies, including the bodies of countries' names. Incapable of syntactically defending that and of countering what uses remotely. All identities of sophistication, non-sophistication, and the difference, and the exceptions. In employ, manifest, where we are Trinity manifest, where we are not just where it is not just the other species bodies. Well, not just like it is not our bodies, but it is. It revealed. It employed slash hyper-employed why and how we are individual as a distinct volume slash volumes science. And now in the reverse, sequence value is relative to. So my programs are going to be working with hyperrelativity. My programs are working with what is recorded actually at locations. My programs are using lists tied to what is actually the value, recorded the value of readings of statutes, of readings of precedents, and of readings and or non-readings of the value of what came first. And the significance, the value of that too. In other words, everything is led by its value. Its identity it is inseparable from the smallest part of anything, even if it's fantasy made up. From the most finite piece of it, the group, and that's why and how the species bodies are manifest this way. Many pray. Our founders communicated for us to explain how communications are greater than and more finite than what is said, and where and how that is exploited by the torture methods/s rather, and the opposite sequence. This employed additional motivations, natures, needs, interests for blaming the real causes of negative value, nature, progressions, acts, and natures on other things other than ourselves, and or as roles, needs, or natures used to force that thing to be the outcome increasingly. Psychopath, I'm not a doctor. Doctors of mental health originally and still, hyper-evidentially and proven, roles putting fake things into databases while tactically delusions wrought. The locations that George Washington and our other founders had to counter restore to make other founders. This is to bring freedom, not just to themselves, which we still have to bring to themselves. George Washington left us communicated other than he said. That's recorded. Told us to address how he said it was about extortion. He had to counter the extortion of himself. But where everyone was forced to speak was in locations that were involved with the torture method against every single person. That was simultaneously an extortion method. That was simultaneously a slavery method. Because we know George Washington, if you use science properly, communicated for us to get the Constitution on a bridge. And to get Marbury versus Madison's outcome with the relativity of where how real justice must satisfy all appearances of real justice. See, this breaching method employed the real causes of January 6th as presented to us through Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN. Certain type of victim / hyper victim also forced not to say anything about that. All formal contracts regarding computers, regarding syntax, they left out how identity works. And in other words, people pretend things are debatable at locations, online, and with broadcasts, and get away with it because of the employments of all location /s. Every single place the human species body has a body, from before modern nations' foundations. This also consciously having been tactically how we are additionally identity as the ground. By that identity that is not us, it is not the other species bodies, but it is anyway. And it is also where and how the value of the ground, where we are not the ground, but we are anyway. In other words, it communicates other than. Theory is offensively used to prevent from voicing, and that as collusions fitted for they have the former director of the FBI, for example, Robert Luskin, former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organization Act. It was described as a mob statute or something by Judge Napolitano, for example. This is where they leave out the employments of black pupils, whites of eyes, exceptions in exception nature, and the value to the breaching method of natures of experts, people with convictions, not experts doing the difference between that, where how this breaching method employed / hyper employed additional than natural, not that is not natural as criminal insidiousness. For example, to real fast, nature as a footnote, nature employs. In other words, nature demonstrates what is criminal insidiousness, tactically ulterior, from definitions and defenses of the definitions syntactically, for example, to counters with fentanyl, per reports of it, per its roles with those locations, only allowed to counter such things, interstates and international. Also as collusions through time, with all that being used singularly, also by a greater singular. In other words, where and how all locations / s are being used, where our identity of value / value progression, also as the Republic's value, humanities. It is being and having been self-valued, tactically, criminally, foreign influenced. Each age of correlation nature, it employed the identities of each nature of sophistication / non-sophistication, including the branches of government individually grouped and together, simultaneously, consciously, with exceptions and exceptions to that, and those not leaving out, differentially but increasingly better than perfectly, collusions with the opinion natures, only allowed to be manifest A through Z, per roles, self-value, with increasingly from off all locations, needs to hide what actually was the value of the past, actively for grouped reasons and for reasons to come that are shown simultaneously to the adults of and to the kids of overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and the three branches of government at the same time, and the exceptions tied to them, and roles with location / s, all natures, all identities of logic, used effectively by a breaching method, also screening itself, where locations, areas, and states are where the species body, the human body, has a body standing. There is a fake patriotism nature that is used to measure and maintain where and how our names are being and having been used, simultaneously self-value used by a breaching method, tactical ulterior, from what nature would have revealed as answers, what nature is capable of revealing as answers. There are qualities and natures of debate that are affected by where and how, for example, this has manifest, where and how there is that facade interstates, where states' rights originally instilled, and the difference of states' rights and federal that is being used to measure and maintain by a breaching method, sickly distinctly from and through our own, including the other countries involved. So the experts on history hold up England, blame they use the truth for a lie to pretend that it's proper to convict or theorize by using as a principle of reason that the American Revolution was against the English. See, this is to simplify where things are more extensive and simple other, and is to complicate where things are simple. They're only extensive. Keep it blamed on other things, others, ourselves. A breaching method employed. Syntactical counters to things like criminal insidiousness itself, and to things like criminal foreign influences itself relative to the phrase, relative to the only increasing value of the phrase too, unabridged, of the word unabridged, and of the phrase unabridged constitution, and of the relativity of this to proper summaries of American history. You don't leave out how Spain, all these countries were themselves in that suit and tie, counters to it, and exceptions, collusions against themselves, leaving out the only increasing value of understanding too. How semi-ancient times forced, tricked, hurt, and hurt, and persuaded, made only possible defenses of legal syntax and conviction nature, and defenses of that at all locations relative to it, incapable of defending that and of affording discern what's actually recorded, which is also manifest with the names in all sides in criminal and civil cases, and victims advocates at the same time have fact, human nature, quality aspects in nature itself, and federal rules of evidences, crime, acts, and methods, roles, in nature itself. Nature as criminal insidiousness, nature as a word to discern identities, relativity, positive and negative simultaneously. To read the dream of each branch of government. Navajo say that we must read each other's dreams. There are proofs that this is because of how every natural difference, such as the only increasing value of how there are indigenous legal syntax nature, which everyone is. Everyone makes convictions, and properly. I put an arc on this basketball to put it in the thing. That's a conviction. To put it in the basketball properly, to make the shot. That's a conviction, that's correct. Someone will make an exception every time we come late. In other words, nature uses also additionally, also simultaneously, inseparable relativity to even anything that can be made up. It's individual grouped. In other words, itself, why and how. The manifest of individual group differences and species body difference are manifest. The relativity of value / value progression as identity, hyper additionally, distinctly, non-distinctly, and hyper simultaneously. This is the value of locations with computers, of memory, of change, and a constant, what is variable, what is constant. For example, that system, it's individual grouped and together, what its value adds, and syntactical defenses of that, and of every science, leaving out the only increasing value of the discernment of till, not just the value of it. The breaching method as a scientific value that came from semi-ancient times, that employed where and how the branches of government are manifest, conjunction to the short words and to the long words, therefore, of every individual, no matter, and now a leader, if you've only had people come through each age of campus, see, there were collusions made between the differences of campus. Where and how? The breaching method employed a whole bunch of names, KNAVE, pretending they're not names simultaneously, and needing to value others doing and having done that. Because the breaching method knew that nature would increasingly demonstrate remote uses of the words, speaking for the bodies as individuals, as our countries, individually, grouped, and together. Our countries, including through and with our own, as victims / hyper victims, but they'll hurt you if you try to say it that way. And everyone changes what everyone says. They have the political parties, they have possession of the short words of them. In every modern country, where they speak for law, they left out the value, only increasingly the value of the discernment of how each modern country is a victim of the same breaching method. Justification, pretend natures of debate regarding the value of how the suburbs are manifest and people's descriptions of their emotions, what they believe are their motivations for the descriptions of their emotions and of those of others they claim. Emotions are about the simultaneous / hyper simultaneous. And so if any individual is leaving that out, even if everyone altogether is leaving it out, an individual can discern. So rather than in the breaching method employed, don't forget, black and white, and exceptions, and exception nature simultaneously, you mean, and communicate other than they are communicating. Can't help but communicate increasingly as its identity. That unabridged constitution was for the reception of. But self-value, certain type of victim / hyper victim, needing to pretend other two to screen it. Self-value, identity theft, fraud, slanders against our founders. Collusions at all locations, all crime scenes, all where there are natures of debate. There is identity theft, fraud, slander, sequence shifts. Sequence shifts prevent from being discerned. Where the beginning of the Old Testament and the beginning of the Quran are about science. Overtly / counter insidiously. Through the only people allowed to preserve shared elements of human fact, human nature, guidance. And the difference between people against it and pretended for these scientific values, no. And the exceptions, Collusion is changing people's words, pretending people make conspiracy theories. For example, the value of the sequence, what it is said at the beginning of the Old Testament, is that what is communicated at the beginning of the Old Testament is that the identities of the sciences, their names, they would come together and demonstrate how the sciences share an identity and how an ancient hyperarchetypal criminal enterprise, a human fact-cheating nature breaching method, and screening that method simultaneously is employed. When people make defenses of why they attack each other, Democratic and Republican operatives, and exceptions. These are collusions measured and maintained by a breaching method, distinctly from our own, such as the directors of our agencies and recorded countering groups wrong, groups like criminal enterprises, including corruption with their own selves, because they're forcing roles with it, because they're forcing collusion with predicate acts with facts, with each age of fact giving nature signaling distinctly, and collusions with that are off those locations connected. This is to keep it effectively. They have so people can't. They're preventing people from speaking about the past honestly, because the intelligence community had themselves locked themselves and their family members and all kinds of names into uses of other people's names. Where that's some of the things the intelligence community does. Former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, with federal criminals before they got caught, and overt criminal enterprises, and ones with unions too, and other organized crime bodies associated with these same names and families, because from other locations, people need to hurt each age of correlation agent, while simultaneously needing to self-value their health as collusions and or differences in all that in play at all places where databases are. And the difference where there are overt criminal enterprises is actually manifest, and private ones originally and still. And the difference between that, also where and how effectively employed originally and still, with the sense and sensibilities, to use Jane Austen's phrase, of self-valued roles, blaming other things, others, ourselves, for uses of the abridged constitution left relative to the entrenched torture, extortion, and slavery method, also simultaneously manifest three ways, increasingly multi-front. For how this trinity as identity, as nature, identity as the nature in our extent, juxtaposed with the rest of its nature, which is increasingly being transferred in, while our value is being transferred out, while our value is its, and how it stays its value. So it's value progression. The only identity of volume that makes more value through itself alone. It is the phenomenon of being you, however, even though to the slightest extent, it is us again too, grouped ways. For its definition of it, for its use / S of it, again, tactical terror than these have been, consciously to maintain uses of where and how there are projected / hyper-projected, opposite sequence relativity too. It is not just in physics the value of how one identity of hypersimultaneous stays greater than and more, it says, it stays distinctly itself right from left and left from right and up and down. It is greater than height and is deeper than depth, being more finite than the smallest finite detail ever generated. The ancients agreed that there is and discerned before the sciences became criminally foreign influence. There is an identity of hypersimultaneous that is, so is capable of leading all syntactical, all logic, and value treatments distinctly from identity treatments relative to where and to how. It is showing us the value of the discernment of how each individual cell body, cell nucleus, cell wall, /S. These are 3 of 5 distinct identities of positive that are positive to themselves simultaneously or not, relative to the value of the discernment of how its hypernative system is prevent leadership of its hypernative system, not as criminal insidiousness as nature. There's a difference between something natural, but it's only natural as criminal insidiousness. And nature demonstrates, even if a country agrees, even if their branches agree, individually grouped it together, to take part in slavery, even if they believe with their heart and soul that it's right, and maybe all these things to make good excuses for it, because they make killers. What are you gonna make? Then you're gonna blame them, leaving out what made them the killer. The people with the shootings in the cities. Our founders communicated for us to understand how the suburbs were designed to cause negative value needs progressions, acts, and natures, while simultaneously, tactically, methodically being employed, propagated, where roles forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded, only allowed fathomable with criminal insidious natures of means to cause positive value needs progressions, acts, and natures, as collusion with the negatives for how identity works, for how programming works. There are proofs that programming was a word in the dictionary before the computers. Databases add relatively to our names and relative to where and to how it maintained means from abroad, from other lands, to keep themselves and grouped and the people they war with, also collusions, also with a hypercriminal enterprise, also with uses of all these other apparent motivations. It's money. Oh, it's power. How are you going to speak for power leaving this out? How are proper treatments of borders or of wall, relativity, wall/S relativity to borders? Nature uses how we're individual grouped, difference between neighbors, and the rest of the species body names. And again, nature uses how it is every identity is relativity to positive and negative simultaneously. It's 3 identities of it. And they are positive to itself per its system or not. So indigenous populations and members individually grouped and together, they're communicating like our founders too. distinctly, not distinctly, you know, greatly and more finite than what they say, which is also communicating where and how they are forced to entertain psychopath, calm, scientific natures of debate treatments, and or aggressive ones, and name uses. But this is also how through our own people, in, as our names assign in our natural difference, slash S, assigned to mean increasingly other than can be afforded discerned when, you know, oh, but this is how our business makes money. In other words, it's not just, it was slavery against everyone. That's why where they make subject treatment slavery. The breaching method measures and maintains everyone leaves out the slavery of George Washington, of James Madison, the syntactical slavery. Everyone leaves out how the breaching method employed, how people would pretend other. Or what do you mean they're a slave? They were a leader. The leaders didn't have free speech. The breaching method had its already sustained employed. All natural difference, slash S. Native Americans against Native Americans. For natural reasons too, because now everyone's forced trigger, your educational words were changed. They were taken away, not remembered. It's going to have an effect. Nature demonstrates that. Nature demonstrated what it was demonstrating. Part of what it was demonstrating was the existence of a human fact human nature breaching method that employed fake integrity of sciences individually grouped in together. So there's no game. Why we fight by the rules. And where and how evolution science should only feel like game. Otherwise you sense it. See, but we have people that are sensing things wrong because of how they employ and force. Either you react to things wrong, where and how we have differences with other people at locations, or worse, because they're leaving out the foreign involvements, which is increasingly not the other names of the other countries and not our own alone. Who is it then? It's not the overt criminal enterprises. It's not the private ones. You can discern where it is, where they have to hide the same sequence shift self-value as already actually recorded, having been communicated. Right through elections, remote uses consciously of where and how, of like Central Connecticut State University is in Britain, Connecticut. They affected confessions. They affect confessions time as statements, also in the form of statements, and also where they protract it and plant fake motives at the same time. For the future, they're doing this right now on campuses. Now, to do this, we have to deal with the actual acts. Because it is also differential. These are victims slash hyper victims with off-campus influences. But this has been sustained. So other apparent motivations, natures, needs, interests, for example, with more child abusers, leaders of the kids, recorded. Even if they made up or made up part of all of it, it was reported there are more people further involved with that. The agencies have roles with corners of streets and all along roads and routes, where and how investigators, and their campuses, and or where they live, differentially, but no why, but increasingly exceptions are made for them. Uses of that. corners of streets near people that live near them, to further illusions, to pretend they, to hide their uses of their motivations, narratives, relative to where and how there are only three branches of government in every country, and the exceptions in exception nature involved. Again, assigned tactical ulterior from how we are programmed / hyper programmed by nature simultaneous, hyper simultaneous. Again, that which you use is where and how it is that identity of simultaneous that no other identity of simultaneous could be, but is anyway. See, we can't be the giraffe, and the giraffe can't be us, but they are anyway by its bridge of this. Where and how it has each of the species, has even sharks 2 eyes, even fish, birds 2 eyes, male, female, species body, individual bodies. These are 3 volume sciences. Cell nucleus, cell body, cell wall, 3 identities of relativity to itself. Cell wall / S. And what is coming out, what is coming through with the cell walls, those cells connect. Cell body, cell nucleus, cell wall. See these not as 3 physically manifest things, but of 3 identities of simultaneously increasing value / value progression. Each one of them, each part of it. And we know where the cell / S are connected. There is also reception of gases and of their relativity positive negative to the identity of value progression of the living animal and or of the plant. Why and how this trinity is manifest is with everything else in demonstration of its distinct, non-distinct, and hyper-simultaneous / simultaneous relativity to itself, where it has a simultaneously a value transfer, where the part of it that can't be its complete identity. In other words, where the part of it is temporary, it can make more volume through of its complete volume. It is valued to its complete identity more this way. But it takes away from its value, while it simultaneously adds to its value other way, where and how it won't mix with temporary space nature. It is too finite, and it is too great, and simultaneously it is active, where and how it is showing us and shows us simultaneously to know already, if we had school campuses, right, where and how it is making more of itself, right here where we are active. And we have the value. See, this breaching method employed the suburbs tactically denatured also. So no matter what nature of unity would form, to counter the extortions, and slavery sickly distinctly again of the fact-giving nature against every single person. The Native Americans were the last to fall, halfway, with our founders, who are still halfway fallen. They did not get us to the point where we'll allow ourselves to get the Constitution unabridged. Self-valued our being and having been roles, keeping negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, such as those reported and demonstrated associated with the Washington, D.C., with everything. And then with the January 6th treatments, and since, leaving out the breaching method, not just leaving out criminal foreign influences relative, but also hypercriminal foreign influences. Again, nature shows us there is a distinct identity of hyper-simultaneous that comes with the discernment of the value of sequence also has a distinct identity of simultaneous nature. Not just are we sequenced with the physical, and so, for example, how identity and how reason works. It is easy to understand, and it is hard to understand tactically the ulterior from we have from the what is described by the identities of experts A through Z, where how this propagated self-cultivated roles, where and how we are additionally identity as the ground too. It is associated with the phenomenon with where and how we are simultaneously 15 manifest identities of conjunction to itself that have been employed / hyper employed by the breaching method from some ancient times. Self-value, criminally foreign influence, as criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments and or negative treatments, and or neutrality treatments as descriptions regarding descriptions of things and or of names. Again, this is where we are additionally voicings for the ground, where we are not the ground, but we are anyway. But our system, our uses of quality nature of debate formally, not just with presidents, before this, all locations, areas, and states, self-valued roles with uses of all words and phrases as value. Like debate, where value, this is also where value is nature / nature is value, and the opposite sequence / simultaneous nature. And this is what reason, this is how computers perceive relative to this. How the phenomena of the volume is only increasing, but they're leaving out what are those three hyper additional identities of relativity as itself, three additional identities of simultaneous nature. So, Maxine knows here, teachers think, thank you, here. Pantheism, hyper-pantheism, black pupils, here. So we can make boxing, martial arts, and wrestling. We can use this to make a feature to better than do damage control. For where and how they have employments of all natures of the law. For example, digital police. They have collusions with child offenders, child abusers. The UN, United Nations. They have roles with names at forensics locations through time involved with crimes with their federal criminals and their people with them, associated with them, including Sandy Hook campuses and a prison campus there. Reported crimes with their patients and criminals before they were caught. There are proofs they have roles with investigators there. Now, these are roles that were reported, better than proofs. That they're pretending things that haven't been proven in courts aren't real. Because they have been roles with all sides in criminal and civil cases, simultaneously collusions with the news and with victims and victims' advocates, and names with the courts, putting sequential fake things in databases more and more. Fake motivations as collusions, recorded consciously. This thing employed the suburbs tactically denatured to cause negative attitudes, progressive tax natures, to employ them blamed all the things other than themselves, to simultaneously employ criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments as collusions with the identity, theft / fraud / slander method. Our founders communicated for us to communicate about. All names with American history, the breaching method measures and maintains, people trying to take down the statues, and the statues, and the statues of American history's names, and the people trying to counter it as collusions, forcing quality nature debate as collusion, the fake side difference, use of exception nature can't appreciate how nature communicates, again, with a special difference too. Earth has a special difference relative to the rest of space nature. Recorded and used remotely are self-value denials of the significance of this, of the value of other locations. There are ways to use words like research or evidence, criminally foreign influence. The breaching method employed that, where how it employs invisible but still discernible things, and hyper-invisible but still discernible things. The parts of speech are invisible but still discernible, and they come with the hyper-invisible but still discernible. And with its further, simultaneously adds the value further also of its positive or negative relativity to itself. Part of how nature demonstrates this is with these Avadi force-based nature transfer. There are laws that if someone, in other words, if you ask someone if they want to help you with a project, then they can say, then they can pretend, oh, we spent time working on you that, and try to sue you for money in your project. So if people are not going to do that, only that we want to help. And this is a project we don't want if it's not going to come through YouTube. So I want to ask them together if we can put down ground too. Use of where and how boxing, martial arts, and wrestling. For example, this is also for comedy. Just know. But we're real evolution science only feels like game / SRL's descent. Because where the evolution's fruits and gifts come. But there's a difference between evolution's fruits and gifts that are criminal, insidious as natures of positives. For its definition of it. It, no matter if it, in other words, it has the breaching method employed the suburbs tactically into nature, to knowing that while it was generating what was going to build the cities as top-down nature of identity of relationship to the grounds, identity of relationship to itself. That it knew would hold manifest, where we are manifest as 15 distinct identity grounds, identity of relationships to itself, with a relativity of the distinct identities of sequence / simultaneous nature are. Again, they're sequence nature. That's how the identity is discerned. Every temporary identity, real made up, every part of itself, individually finite, the order of finite, grouped and all together. They have what is really true no matter if everyone agrees to pretend other. As it with a sequence truth valued per its system, and they have what is value to come, no matter what is really the value to come. So the breaching method employed would unfold as modern cities. And it employed, for example, Hartford, Connecticut to be a suburban / urban. Where and how George Washington is reported to have chopped down the cherry tree. But he said he didn't. For example, he had to come to Connecticut, which CT is how we write Connecticut, which known as the abbreviation for cherry tree. This is not to make a theory, because regardless, He did come to Connecticut and have to leave slavery entrenched. He did communicate for us to communicate how he had to speak, other than with the other founders. Then communications is greater than, more finite than what is said. And we're not supposed to leave out the breaching method. How are you? Hello, person of the species volume nature system. We are in a semi-ancient trap / S. The plural part. The four plural parts are used to screen the semi-ancient trap that knew it would have to keep what it caused and causes at the same time, blamed on other things other than ourselves. So it is important to discern what was sustained and what was being used, where being sustained were things relative to where and how the Native Americans and indigenous populations of every modern country, they are heard singly, distinctly, individually grouped and together. By this identity of relativity to positive and negative treatments, names uses, that is presented. Boxing, martial arts, and wrestling, they share an identity. Boxing. You can, if you discern. See how wrestling is all grappling. There are exceptions like the WWFs and stuff. Once in a while they'll do things like that. Wrestling is part grappling, part striking. And boxing, boxing is supposed to be all striking, and you're not supposed to grapple, but you can't help a little bit. Science is sharing identity. Boxing. So music, the notes of music individually grouped and together, they share an identity. That way. So that's a whole other video. All right, have a great day. I don't see your name, it doesn't say it. But you can sing. Okay, I'll sing. I'm trying to think of a song to sing. I had a good one. So I have some good country love songs. I don't know what I do with these things. I lose them. Here goes. No, I don't know. Okay, ready? Okay, now I'm sorry, I can't think. So this is the thing, y'all. Like sings, but nature's voice. And this comes through contemplation and through its relativity to things like memory, to things like location, and to where and how it is only increasingly valued to discern the use / S of all locations by the breaching method before our founders were even born. There are uses consciously of people tied to fake communications and fake nature of communications with the people around each other. They have people take pictures of this too, where and how they get away with keeping the identities of the states and of the federal and of other countries, versions. These are uses of our names, tactical ulterior from how nature employed them, / hyper employed them. So Anthony Wall, YouTuber, boxer, academician. I have to get my professional boxing license. There is a Leahy family of doctors. Then I don't know. They sent through the mail. They pretended they had conversations with me. They're involved with the FBI director, a former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and various courts, judges and prosecutors and their family members, personally and professionally, criminally for influence with them. Forgiveness is to not pretend to end up blaming them personally. That pretends I had conversations with them. They have roles fabricating audio and video transcripts with the investigators of the World Trade Center attack, wearing how our sides, wearing their suits and ties and counters to them. And exceptions have been employed self-value, syntactical collusions, buying foreign words. And they're even discerning. Those who discern, they're hiding, they're measuring and maintaining self-value roles with predicate acts with facts, and with the use and/or uses of names differentially, and the difference of that at each age of campus. Totally unconnected campuses with connections made for them, relative to uses of the employments propagated by the breaching method, self-cultivated through other identity, the ground identity relationship to themselves, as identities leaving out that breaching method, with logic, with convictions, and as nature, as criminal insidious as nature, per nature's means to discern this. So we're going to have to discern, all subject treatments, understanding simultaneously how criminal insidiousness is manifest. With positive treatments too, not just with negative treatments. As nature, we have to discern nature as a word, as identity, for identity, where we're looking at its relativity to positive and negative simultaneously, as equality of diffusion active, as we know what is constantly positive to it, and as we know what is variably positive to it or not. See, we're all such, constant variable treatment is being used to measure and maintain the sophistication / hyper sophistication, and the value of that, of the hyper simultaneous left out. So the identity of value / value progression that is additionally conceived relative to the potential of any electrical circuit or computer with memory locations and with lists and or arrays. These are different of that treatments that can't defend itself with each of the sciences, uses of the words they use, relative to what made a certain type of victim / hyper victim only allowed to be manifest. Where, for example, there are help desks manifest, where there's not really help desk, but in other words, where there are points of communications. This employed, this showed, the breaching method showed the only 3 branches of the government showed their kids and their adults need to self-value roles of things they don't even realize, so they would stop them. But where there are exceptions, they are shown to them how they use everyone remotely. And the difference between them, see, they have all sides in criminal and civil cases, victims advocates, they're appointed advocates, the campuses they went to, their homes, the homes of people tied to them, and look like everywhere they go, used to drop off needs. A breaching method keeps them needing to make up and hide finite details, group details, and simultaneous ones. It's part of how the hyper-simultaneous and proper counters to criminal diseases, natures, and methods have stayed. So it was a torture, extortion, slavery method that only allowed modern cities to become manifest the way they were. because the breaching method was and is still trying to seek out and effectively already saw out, figured out what our founders were communicating to us, and stole their identities from us in our face overtly / insidiously, pretending others through our own experts. You have to understand the importance of forgiveness because of the relativity of everyone differentially, critically foreign influence, not wanting to be and to have been with fact treatments. For example, when you blame on other things other than yourselves, the real causes of slavery, the way the breaching method wanted and needs you to, you know, you have to defend that by self-valuing criminally foreign influence, fact treatment, nature, quality aspects of nature. We're relative of the difference between how the formal voices of the law and informal ones, like people associated with murders and stuff, for themselves, even if they make it up, even if they're making it up. In other words, with YouTube videos, there was Siri the Bull is one of the people involved, people I never had a class with, and people involved with mayors and other natures of politicians who have that, who are apart with where how they've been used as a volume as criminal insidiousness, as roles with identity theft, fraud, slander instances, relative, because there are connections between people who approach strangers, pretending passions and emotions, asking questions and or making statements. One of the connections is roles with predicate acts on off Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut. Increasingly with names from other campuses also, like UConn, I agree with the person also, all campuses. There's nothing personal against them too. When they pretend that is also criminally foreign influence uses of that. Tactically delusions raw. Their roles with psychiatry, we have to purge from the campuses. They have roles with the coffers associated with it. That more than we need for things that they had roles with, furthering through wars, through the investigation since, through what is behind defenses. The people will be protest. We need to pretend appearances of justice, otherwise the people will go crazy. That's an outcome. That's a maintained screen of why and how Marbury versus Madison, we're supposed to, and Constitution unabridged, we're supposed to explain how George Washington and our founders were tortured, extorted, in fact, human nature enslaved, also through our own, who forced all records, uses of databases, uses of descriptions of all instances, of all names, to screen roles with all crime scenes too, and the names right next to them. Increasingly, not by accident. This has employed roles self-value with predicate acts through facts, where things like color are brought up. When it measures and maintains, blamed on other things other than ourselves. Where and how our states had roles with this. Self-value uses of states' rights and or the value of federal with juxtaposed with them anyway. United them anywhere. And the difference of that. Employed incapable of defending their logic and natures and of affording discern what the value of what came first. So they have to pretend passions and emotions using knowledge of good and evil. Use the phrase past the point. Where the Old Testament says don't go past this point. Communicates. Stay with the sciences, the identity of the sciences share will be voiced. So we can generate a whole bunch of, better than a charity, we have to do this though, to do it right, because We can put it to a charity too, but we have to make like a virtual means to defend, and one of them we're gonna defend this fact-checking nature, where and how New York City is being tortured, extorted, and enslaved, distinctly from the people of the suburbs that were designed for this before our founders were born, and where and how that has gotten away with pretending that that is debatable is also evidence. That's why we have to be able to force people to get onto paper too. Where and how the interbranch have roles with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. At the same time as with the names, as people with foreign, a whole bunch of different countries, at the same time roles with remote uses of all sides in criminal and civil cases, the victims advocates, their campuses, their family members, their homes. In other words, saying this has been using all locations /s, entertaining what can't be entertained, and also defended at the same time. Vaccine. I teach us day long. So if there's a sports celebrity or any other kind of celebrity who wants to break through the theater /hypertheater only has criminal insidiousness and use of that. Have some weak-minded actors, I need patients and criminals have collusions together, pretending offensively what they feel about things like mental, but I need the pills for myself, a woman's actress. These are people involved with uses of databases, criminally foreign influence, fake conversations with people have collusions with crime scenes, and uses of corners of buildings, and all sides of homes and of campuses for fact-checking nature-oriented predicate acts, exploiting where and how we are an identity of value/value progression. They say things about people right when other people are going to be walking by. And then they do that same thing to other people. I saw this. I noted this manifest. One of the things where and how we are exploited as an identity of value. For the same reason and more reasons, finite, grouped, and greater than, while that volume science individual grouped together, then why computers work the way they do. Thank you. So someone please respond too, because in other words, they've been faking conversations also with the private ties to the interbranch. They have been putting fabricated audio and video transcripts with tricks in their databases as collusion with crime scenes. It is relative used to measure when they use statistics regarding the conviction rate at courts that is used to effectively measure and maintain. People are either simultaneously tactically delusions raw and criminally foreign influence fact-checking nature quality aspects in nature, where they speak about things like crimes and or like law and or like law's nature and or identity. So those are people showing needs to keep blamed all of the things others ourselves, where and how and why. Fake integrity speaks for why, for the employments of color narratives in nature. No, nature communicates other for integrity. And integrity has pretended with passions and emotions is allowed to discern. So now I'm telling you how this is going to work. In other words, boxing, martial arts, and wrestling. Is there who disbelieves? Is there someone who disbelieves? When did we make it background? Forget the process about background. But any social, this should go for every social thing. We should have to take the policing, pull it out from hiding behind. Because before these social media companies were designed, Central Connecticut State University in New Britain already had roles with criminally foreign influence use of databases that, per the method, that had nothing to do with, since before computers. And now it's screening those motives for roles with the computer. Roles with uses of what, really why, and how they have the classes distinct, not distinct, and hyper simultaneously, sickly, distinctly, but also sickly, not distinctly, incapable of defending the positive and negative treatments, the names treatments and uses, all values treatments, like words like crimes. They have roles with predicate acts methods way worse than the kids, where and how they've been involving the names at the campuses, with narratives regarding what happened off campuses, with narratives regarding what they feel is the value of their title. This employed the short words and truths like where and how. The service people, they sacrifice their time to the word. Nature shows us the reasons to value them or to fight with them. Our tactical ulterior. I mean, other than these tactical ulterior that we're being forced to act syntactically with. And they're changing also our non-reactions syntactically. They painted themselves in corners since they were kids. So get them on paper, because I can't do anything in life until I get the people. These are people with Connecticut, with the World Trade Center predicate acts. They use criminally foreign influence, West Hartford locations, and names, and New Britain names, Hartford names involved with Weathersfield campuses, Rocky Hill campuses. Names through time, putting predicate acts with facts into databases as collusions, pretending other. You fear God to hide and plot. I'll wrap a lot. Make sure they get on paper too. These are more World Trade Center predicate acts. The ones further with the principal child abuser. And people commenting on my posts relative to this. Descriptions of things are being and have been employed criminally foreign influence. Fear God to hide and plot. And say sorry to Judge Napolitano, digital police, and ones associated with the World Trade Center. Fear God for pretending passions and concerns. You don't care.